Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hanendra. Please let me continue our group's presentation about disadvantages. So let's start from the consequences for education. Now, there has been widespread misunderstanding in the United States of AAVE, or the African American Vernacular English, both of its characteristics and of how it is used, according to Mulvaney 1998. Nah, this misunderstanding has had a number of unfortunate consequences. Many educators regarded the various distinguishing characters of AAVE as deficiencies. Black children were deficient in language ability because their language did not have certain features of the standard, and the consequence of that deficiency was cognitive deficiency. It is sometimes called the deficit hypothesis. According to Brader and Engelman in 1966, they state that such children show a total lack of ability to use language as a device for acquiring and processing information. Nah, language for them is unwieldy and not very useful. In the late 80s, this view led to certain proposals to teach black children the standard variety of the language in order to remedy the deficiencies that they believe to exist. Brader and Engelman proposed a program designed to teach black children how to speak. For example, they were taught how to make statements, how to make form negatives, how to use prepositions to categorize objects, and etc. Now, they considered black children suffered from verbal deprivation or had no language, and it was the duty and responsibility of educators to supply them with one. And then let's move to the eradicate AAVE. Now, there is an attempt to eradicate AAVE and replace it with standard English. Now, this double AVE may not limit its users cognitively, but it certainly limits them socially. And one of the purposes of education is the achievement of social equality. This is the traditional attitude that educators have toward non-standard dialects. However, Labov in 1986 and others have been severely critical of such views, believing that they completely misrepresent the linguistic abilities of black children. These children speak a variety of English which is different from the standard favored by educators, but it is neither deficient nor unsystematic. Indeed, the variety is both systematic in itself and is also related systematically to the standard. Moreover, black children live in a rich verbal culture in which linguistic ability is highly prized and in which many opportunities are offered for a competition in verbal skill. To assume that such children cannot affirm, negate, categorize, or think logically because they perform poorly in certain extremely inhibiting testing situations is absurd. They must use language all the time in order to get by, and any fair test of linguistic ability shows them to be as skilled as any other children. In addition, black children have rich store of verbal games which encourage them to develop their verbal skills. That such children need compensatory education for their lack of linguistic ability is a complete misinterpretation of the facts. And then bidialectalism. An alternative approach has been called bidialectalism. The speakers of AAVE should be taught to speak standard English, but no attempt should be made to eradicate AAVE. Indeed, the early stages of instruction, AAVE itself should be used as the language of instruction. For example, in recommending the reading materials written for black children should recognize the existence of the AAVE. This attempt to use transitional reading materials written in AAVE proved a complete failure. Those who advocated the use of such materials saw them as providing a kind of bridge into readers written in standard English. They argued that black children had enough problems when they entered school without facing the additional barrier of learning to read from readers written in an alien dialect. They could learn to read in their own dialect and make a later transition to books written in the standard. And then, yeah, as you know that race and language were united, but however, there are two important incidents affecting the schooling of blacks in the United States. The first one is the famous Ann Arbor decision in 1979. It is an example of successful claim that AAVE is a bona fide dialect that school must recognize. The parents of 11 African American children attending Martin Luther King School in Ann Arbor, Michigan, sued the school board in federal court saying that their children had been denied the equal opportunity to which they were entitled on an account of the variety of English they spoke. They judged in the case agreed and ordered the board to take appropriate action to teach the children to read. If that action required the school system to recognize that the children did speak a different variety of the language from that used elsewhere in the school system, then the school system had to adjust to the children and not the children to the school system. Although this is not quite a decision in favor using both AAVE and the standard English, it did give both legal and public recognition to AAVE as an issue that educators could not shy away from. And then the second one is the Oakland School Board in California, 1996. This incident involves ebonics, a term particularly popular among those who believe that there are strong connections between AAVE and African languages, specifically the Niger-Congo languages. The Oakland School Board in California decided to recognize, maintain, and use ebonics in the classroom so that black children would eventually acquire fluency in standard English. As a result, the board declared ebonics to be a separate language from English and categorized as genetically based. Okay, from all that we have discussed, we should believe that language should not be an issue at all in any education. Yeah, we should believe that language should not be an issue at all in education. They regard all varieties of language as equal. So what should be doing is teaching everyone to be tolerant and accepting of other varieties. Now the reality is that people do use language as a discriminator in just about every sense of that word. What actually happens is that although public discrimination on the grounds of race, religion, and social class is not publicly acceptable, it appears that discrimination on linguistic grounds is publicly acceptable, even though linguistic differences may themselves be associated with ethnic, religious, and class differences. Varieties of language do exist, and people do use these varieties for their own purposes. And then let's continue to the journal analysis. I got this journal from the International Journal of Language and Communication Disorders. It is written by Sarah Spencer, Judy Clegg, and Joy Stockhorse from the Department of Human Communication Science of University of Sheffield in the UK, and the title is Language and Disadvantage, a comparison of the language abilities of adolescents from two different socioeconomic areas. As we know that socioeconomic disadvantages has been linked to a language delays in early childhood. Much less research has examined the association between socioeconomic background and language in adolescents. This paper addresses this research gap and contributes further evidence that socioeconomic disadvantage is associated with lower scores on standardized language assessment. Two groups of adolescents were compared, one from an area of socioeconomic disadvantages and the other from an area of relative advantages. And the biggest differences between the two groups were on measures of vocabulary. Many participants had a profile of assessment consistent with undetected language difficulties, and this paper adds to debate on the functionality of standardized language assessment, now particularly when used with adolescents from areas of socioeconomic disadvantages. This, uh, this study has implications for the need of whole school support for language and vocabulary, given the large proportion of participants with low language scores, particularly in areas of social disadvantages. And then it is for justifying increased language assessment and provision in secondary school for individuals, as evidenced by the high numbers of participants who meet criteria for the undetected language difficulties. And then working, and the last one, it's for working towards greater consistency for criteria used to identify adolescents' language difficulties to ensure equality in access to service across different settings. And then let's start from the background. As we know that children from areas associated with socioeconomic disadvantages are somehow at an increased risk of delayed language development. But so far, research has focused mainly on young children only, and there has been little investigation into language development of adolescents. And this study aims to investigate the language abilities of adolescents from two different socioeconomic areas. This paper aims to determine if a higher proportion of adolescents from an area of socioeconomic disadvantage have low language scores when compared with adolescents from a relatively advantaged area. The method being used and the procedure, the researcher used 6 standardized language assessment to measure expressive and receptive language skills across vocabulary, syntax, and narrative in two groups of 13 and 14 years old. One group attending a school in an area of socioeconomic disadvantages, consisting of 103 participants, and the other group attending a school in an area of relative socioeconomic advantage, consisting of 48 participants. And the outcomes and the results, it is found that the group from the area of disadvantage performed significantly lower than the assessment's normative mean on all measures of language ability. There were significant differences between the two groups on 4 of the 6 language measures. More adolescents from the school in the area of socioeconomic disadvantage had the standardized assessment scores that suggest hitherto undetected language difficulties. And then the conclusions and the implications. The results suggest that the socioeconomic background is associated with language ability in adolescents as measured by standardized tests. In particular, adolescents from an area of socioeconomic disadvantage were at risk of low vocabulary scores. The advantages and disadvantages of using standardized language assessments are discussed in the implications for clinical and educational practice, and for school level policies are highlighted. And then what can we conclude from this material that I have explained in the journal? We know that many people believe that some languages or varieties are better than others. People consider that some languages are particularly beautiful and the others are primitive, then consider some dialects more expressive and the others are deficient. In other words, it is widely believed that we can be advantaged or disadvantaged, not just socially or aesthetically, but also cognitively and intellectually by the language and age or variety we speak. Differences may exist within the total community that the variety or the varieties spoken by one group may be quite unlike the variety spoken by some other group, while actually both groups may still be said to be speaking the same language. In such circumstances, we may appreciate why a variety spoken by a group that has a favored position in society is likely to be considered more prestigious and hence often to be used as a model for speakers of other varieties than the other spoken by a group that is less favored. One variety may eventually be promoted to serve as a standard for the whole community and become the norm against which all other varieties are judged. We should know that no variety of language is inherently better than any other. All language and all varieties of a particular language are equal in that they quite adequately serve the needs of those who use them. A standard variety of language is better only in a social sense. It has preferred status, it gives those who use it certain social advantages, and it increases their life chances. Non-standard varieties tend to produce the opposite effect. These are some of the consequences that follow from elevating one variety and denigrating others, but there is no reason to suppose that any one of these varieties is intrinsically more worthy than any other. And what and we should change the society to accommodate the characteristics of child rather than requiring the child to adapt to the society. Those who deny children access to any awareness of the implications of speaking with one accent rather than another are doing them an obvious disservice. If they cannot also guarantee that society's attitudes will have changed in time for that generation of children to benefit. So this is the references, and then